question on the slide.
Yeah.
So the emissions to date is 369, and then the safe emissions limit is 130.
So the safe, yeah. So if you add those two together, that's the total safe emissions limit since the start of the Industrial Revolution. So it's basically saying there's about 500 is the limit. We've already emitted like 370. We've got another 130 we can just about afford to emit. Yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Okay. So I mean, the next bit of the talk is going to be talking about each of the different types of unconventional fossil fuels. So maybe if anyone's got any questions or they want to make any points on the sort of the global context, then now's the point to it. So just maybe just to re-emphasise my message I'm trying to get across with this is that all of these unconventional fossils, all these forms of extreme energy are symptoms of the problems with our political systems, and that's what we need to change. That's what we fundamentally need to change if we want to deal with any of these problems. And we've got to do it fairly quickly as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I sort of dispute that you can't actually have economic growth, without the CO2, actually. I mean, I believe that you can have a lot of economic growth in developing renewable energy solutions, in fact, So, yeah, I think that is one route to economic growth, actually, is developing renewable energy solutions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Did you want to respond to that point? Or?
Okay, I know his hand was up before mine, and I don't know when Julie's went up.
Hey, what I've got to say is in one of the last talks we had about capitalism, is capitalism part of the answer?
Oh, yeah.
And Petit Four.
Sorry?
And Petit Four, one of the speakers,
okay,
from some research
yeah.
think tank.
Yep.
She said she could have pleaded to us not to use the word growth. She said, like, it was invented in 1967 or something like that by OECD. Mm-hmm. She said, and that it was, before that, economists used to talk about the level. And she said it's fine to talk about like that we need more jobs, but she sort of, I don't know, I felt I was quite convinced by what she said about growth being somehow really buying into the neoliberal model, and that it's actually anyway. So I just thought I'd share that because I don't actually have the follow through something that she said. Yeah.
So maybe we just let people talk and then I'll sort of respond to stuff in a bit.
Yeah, I'd just like to respond to that point is that we could, I think it would be good to increase the green section of our economy, but the question is, do we increase the amount of resources being consumed as an overall thing? So you can have growth in the renewable section, but overall I think we definitely need to reduce the amount of carbon consumption and energy consumption.
Yeah.
There was a study into whether you could reduce, there was a sustainability study. There used to be a Department for Sustainable Economics that this government abolished, and there was a report written that you can still find, I can't remember his name now, but he looked into this question of growth and decarbonisation, and you can reduce the amount of carbon being consumed when you grow the economy, but you can't do it enough. So if you still grow the economy, although you can reduce the carbon intensity, it's still going to overall increase, as every time it grows it increases the carbon intensity. So I do think that we do need to move towards a new way of looking at the economy. Yeah. And the other thing is, I think that alongside the environmental impacts on growth, there's also another question about growth, because growth usually means an increase in financialisation of interaction. So sometimes economists refer that to is like a lot of our growth in our economy is actually people cutting each other's hair. So, or things like the growth of the things that used to maybe done by more relationship, like looking after children or producing food. And those things, when they're transactions about money rather than personal relationships, I think they atomise us and reduce relationships. So I think there's another reason why growth isn't a good thing, because it reduces our relational way of relating to each other, reduces our community way. So there's a whole other thing about growth that is why I think it's
well, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Go on, so Yeah. I mean, basically reacting to this whole growth thing, Anne Pettifer's line was a very appealing kind of long sound bite, which has been retweeted an awful lot. I would say it is an oversimplification, and the issue is how you define growth. And I know Tim Jackson on Prosperity Without Growth, around page 81, produces all these figures to say you cannot have economic growth without increased release of CO2. That was written in about 2006, I think. You can the way the economy's gone since then, I think makes that challengeable, and I'm not the only person who thinks that. But we do need to refine, develop, elaborate our notion of growth. Growth doesn't actually encapsulate improved technology. I mean, the app which tells me when my bus arrives is free, therefore, inverted commas, therefore it doesn't hit the growth thing. When a computer does the same job that it did 2 years ago for half the price, that doesn't register as an increase in gross national product over a period of 4 years when it's half the price and twice as fast. That doesn't count as economic growth. So we need better metrics. If you try and sell to the general population, you are not going to get any more prosperous. Good luck to you. It's easier to do in nice, relatively comfortable middle class environments than it is in people, who are in the bottom, 40% economically. And I know there is masses of stuff that we can do convivially and so on, but I don't see why we should necessarily hobble ourselves by saying we are against all forms of growth. Technology is going to continue to develop, almost certainly, and that can be factored in. We need to elaborate our notions of growth and take out the sort of CO2 element, it's just how you do accountancy basically. And you talk to a creative accountant, there's an awful lot of ways of doing accountancy and scoring things.
Yeah, sorry,
just brief comment about, in addition to that, which is why contraction and convergence makes so much more sense, trying to reduce inequality, reduce the resources and energy use of people who probably use more than they need, and balance that out by allowing people who don't have enough to grow and meet their needs.
It makes a lot of sense, but factor in sociobiology.
Okay, this is fun, isn't it? It's the new Putney Debates, it's good to have a little bit of debate. So the only thing I just wanted to check in is we're probably about halfway through, so I don't want to tire everyone out too much. But if people want to carry on talking about this quickly, then maybe we should do that for a second.
Unload your knowledge.
You do.
just one thing, Chris. Don't make it so you have to cut out anything from your presentation, because we have plenty of opportunities to continue discuss general.
Oh, okay.
More general.
Well, in that case, it's okay if I leave your points on that, and then maybe there'll be another opportunity later to bring it up again. So I'm just going to make on that subject just make two very, very brief points. I mean, there's lots of discussion around resource consumption and economics and new forms of economics, and there's a whole movement called degrowth about how we can have sustainable but flat economy. So instead of being constantly increasing, then they could sustain everyone and not collapse and have all the sorts of problems with economic collapse, but also not go up, not increase. So there's all that kind of stuff going on. The basic points I want to make is that climate change and carbon emissions is just one of the environmental problems we're faced with increased economic growth and resource consumption. There's a whole range of other environmental problems, some of which are almost on the same kind of global collapse kind of scale as climate change. I think it's I'm not going to say who it is because I can't remember exactly. But there's a research group that says that actually, I think it's 7 different areas where we're currently heading towards global collapse. So there's the planetary boundaries, yeah. So there's other stuff like soil, for example, can only continue to support our form of agriculture for a certain amount of time, or so that's the nitrogen cycle, or another one is ocean acidification. So another consequence of emitting lots of CO2 is that the oceans are getting more acidic, and that's particularly damaging to certain parts of ecosystems which the entire ocean depends on, and we are very much still dependent on the oceans for our food. So there may be ways of, for example, decarbonising economic growth to some extent, but you're not going to remove all forms of resource consumption from economic growth. That's a really important point. The other really important point is the social side of it as well. So I don't want to live in a society where we're all competing to outgrow or on an individual, a community or a national basis. I want to live in a society where we're all striving towards equality and living in cooperation, not in competition. And what we forget sometimes when we're talking about this is that the only way that we can support our economies and our current way of life is by having a huge, vast amount of very impoverished people around the world in order for us to continue with the way we're going. So it has enormous social cost as well. It's not just environmental. And of course they're all interrelated as well. So the social and environmental aren't really separable into different problems. They both exist at the same time. So I won't go on about that too much, but for me, everything points towards we can't continue with capitalism. It's come to its end, and we need to develop new systems. I'm sure there's lots of people who have other opinions, but maybe there's some chance to debate on that later on. Cool. Is everyone, if we move on to the next bit? Yeah.